A couple of decades ago, indoor cycling looked and felt very different. Safe to say, it has come a long way since then. In 2014, an idea turned into a reality. Zwift launched its game-changing app in a beta version. It took the cycling world by storm. Indoor training would never be the same again. Fast forward to the present day, and it's a training tool, a game, a competition, a huge cycling community, and a gateway to the professional peloton. As Zwift turns 10 years old, we thought it'd be a good time to look back and see how we got here. This is the story of Zwift. When I was a full-time cyclist, I avoided indoor training unless I had absolutely no choice. Unless it was icy, unless there were gale force winds, I'd be riding outside. Why? Because indoor training was like being in a torture chamber, a place where time seemed to stand still. I mean, I try not to look at my watch through an interval until I thought it was done, and inevitably, when I did look at my watch, I was less than halfway through that interval. It was painful in every respect, but there was a point in time when that all changed. In 2013, Eric Min had an idea, but he needed someone who could make it into a reality. At around the same time, John Mayfield had been using his skills and spare time to make an indoor training game, but he needed someone who had the know-how and means to bring it to the masses.
I had a very different B2B business startup, my previous life. And so I started thinking about doing something more consumer-oriented. I wanted to launch another business. So it was probably November 2013 when I started to explore different opportunities. This one came up, and I started to test the hypothesis and started to think about who would form the team that can help bring this to life. And this is when I came across John Mayfield in the Slow Twitch forum. He'd been working on this closet project for a couple of years, and so I just emailed him. And then a month later, I was at his doorstep, and I think a lot of people...
A deal was soon struck, and along with Scott Barger and Alaric Myrin, they co-founded Zwift in early 2014. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So we had this artificial deadline, and we knew that we had to get it in place, at least in beta form, before the winter started. So we had this deadline internally, and we did everything we could. And the initial interest in this concept was very, very positive. I think it was a combination of other people having probably similar wants, and us doing it with partners who gave us that gravitas, so I think that really helped with the launch.
That it was then released as a beta version later that year is testament to how quickly they set to work. Combined with the Kicker, the world's first smart trainer that Wahoo had launched in 2012, suddenly we could ride indoors and it felt truly realistic and entertaining. For the first time ever, there were decent graphics, automatically simulated gradients, and the ability to draft other riders just as you would do in the real world. It's no exaggeration to say that it was a breakthrough, literally a game-changing moment in indoor training, and so it was no surprise that it became an immediate hit. There was no more need to watch paint dry. Time no longer stood still.
What I was craving for is that sense of community, or more communal experience. I wanted to be somewhere with real people. And obviously that's not easy to do in the real world. So the idea really was, could we create something, an experience, in using video game technology to create that immersive experience? And if it was 70% good enough, that it would probably solve my problem. And I suspected that it would solve the problems of thousands, if not millions, of other people who were challenged to get outside or who were time crunched.
And so, of course, it wasn't long before we got in on the act. Invited to race Jens Vogt virtually, we jumped at the chance. And in what was a slightly unfair 2 versus 1 race, Si and I worked him over good and proper.
How are you going, Si? Bloody hell. He does not know what's hit him.
Where's Jens?
He's not even marked on your screen.
This might be a virtual world, but the pain's real.
It's a virtual world of pain at the moment. Cy Richardson capitalises on the strong teamwork from Daniel Lloyd. He only has 200 metres to go now. He's got a finish line in his sight. He's got time to salute the crowd. He puts his arm in the air. Daniel Lloyd puts his arm in the air, 2Ks behind.
High five, Dan.
High two.
I'm beaten. Square and fair.
That was the biggest win of our careers. In speaking to Jens since, I've learned that he wasn't happy about losing to us. Like, really, really not happy. Which is understandable, but we were over the moon. Not just because we beat a cycling legend, but because it was such a novelty to compete against someone thousands of miles away. A whole new world was opening up to an increasingly large community. A world that has since been filled with thousands of organised rides and races. The KISS Racing League came soon after our initial race, and then the Zwift Racing League, which is continuing to go from strength to strength. We too have continued to get involved in Zwift racing with varying degrees of success and failure. We'll keep trying and failing, I'm sure. In its early days, Zwift already had some pretty lofty ambitions beyond attracting thousands of cyclists to their platform. Inspired by the Gran Turismo Academy, they could envisage Zwift being used as a talent identification program and therefore be a pathway to the professional peloton. And so in 2016, the first ever Zwift Academy was born. Thousands of riders from all over the world participate every single year, with one lucky and very powerful winner offered a contract in a pro team. Tanya Erat, Jay Vine and Neve Bradbury are amongst the winners who've gone on to have successful pro careers, and 7 of those 15 winners are still in pro or development teams to this day. In 2021, I even took part in the Zwift Academy, improving my 10-minute power by 22% in the process. Despite the huge gains and clear talent, Alpecin de Koning passed up the opportunity to sign me. 2016 was actually a really big year for Zwift, but an even bigger one for Matt Hayman. The Australian broke his arm in Omloop Het Nieuwsblad in February of that year, which would normally be the end of a rider's Spring Classics campaign. Not for Hayman, though.
It was all still pretty new. So yeah, I hooked it up. I didn't even have a smart trainer, so I was just using a fan-based trainer, so it was just resistance and gears. So just running off just the power and the heart rate, no fan, and just put the laptop on top of the hot water system. Had the famous ladder out to rest my arm that was in plaster on, and started to get into it. But just having that interaction with the computer, and at the time there were bots riding around on Watopia. There's only one world, and only a couple of hundred people in there. But it just meant that dreading doing 30 minutes, an hour and a half seemed to go by pretty quick, and before I knew it, I was training.
6 weeks after he broke his arm, he lined up on the start line of Paris-Roubaix, the most prestigious and brutal one-day race in the world. Over 260 kilometres with 60 Ks of cobblestones, he eventually crossed the line both in victory and utter disbelief. He'd achieved his dream, and he'd done so in the most unconventional of manners.
The initial it felt very strange to be throwing my hands up in that velodrome. That was very, very not normal for me to be doing in that situation. And there was a bit of a second guess, like, I haven't just made a fool of myself. I have actually won this. Just like what just happened? How does that happen? It doesn't happen to me.
So in summary, Tom Boonen has Zwift to blame for not holding the outright record of Paris-Roubaix wins. In all seriousness though, that win opened the world's eyes to the power of Zwifting. The relationship between Zwift and the pro peloton continued to blossom, and in 2020, with COVID-19 and lockdown bringing a temporary end to racing on open roads, Zwift teamed up with ASO to create the Tour de France Virtuel. A large number of top-level pro teams and riders, including Tour de France winners past and future, competed over 6 stages in July of that year, when the tour should have been taking place on the roads of France. At the same time, more people than ever before were riding on the platform. In a period when billions of people were confined to their homes, It was like a haven for cyclists, a place to keep fit, keep riding with other people, even if you were alone, a place to stay sane during an insane time.
We started a conversation with ASO about, while the Tour de France at that moment was postponed indefinitely. And we said, why don't we do something virtual in Zwift? And we put our heads together and put together the Tour de France Virtuel in 2020. We actually built a French world. We had a 6-stage across like 3 weekends, a Tour de France Virtuel, broadcast in 130 countries. And we did complete equal distance, equal opportunity for the women's and the men's teams. And it was a massive hit, and the women's racing was fantastic. It was just a great opportunity, and that's what sparked the conversation that maybe this is like a match made in heaven. And, maybe Zwift was the right, company to get behind, what, the world was clamoring for, a proper women's Tour de France stage race. So that's when that conversation kicked off.
Once lockdowns eased, road racing resumed, including the Tour de France, for men.
It was clear that the women's peloton was at the level that, they deserved that world stage. And it was also holding back the women's world tour, by not being at the Tour de France. I mean, how can you really grow? How can you, if you're not on that world stage in front of those hundreds of millions of cycling fans, how's the women's, world tour ever going to get to that next stage? So there was a lot of pressure on ASO, and they had already been thinking a lot about, introducing a proper stage race, but they did need the right partner to come on board.
With the help of Zwift, it became a reality in late 2021 when ASO launched the Tour de France Femmes Avec Zwift, an 8-day stage race that would immediately follow the men's. It hit the ground running in 2022, but without Zwift's sponsorship, which they've recently extended, it could well still be a pipe dream. And how fitting that this year, Kasia Niewiadoma of Canyon SRAM, who've long worked in partnership with Zwift, would win the Tour de France. But pro racing was, and still is, only a very small part of what Zwift is. The platform is really for everyone, from lifelong cycling enthusiasts right the way through to people who've barely ridden out on the open road. And for some, it's revealed a hidden talent they never knew they had.
I really wasn't taking it serious until the pandemic had happened. And then my friend had said to me, you should really get on Zwift. Like, all the pros are racing on there because all the races are canceled. So I was like, okay, cool. So then I got on, and every week I was racing with all of these people. And I started to work with a coach. So we kind of took my love of just exercise, I guess, and kind of then it was training with purpose. So I started to learn how to train properly. And I saw a lot of success just with actually following a program. And then I wound up getting picked up by Team 2020 at the time. Nicola Cranmer had reached out to me because I was racing her girls, and she had said, oh, they love racing against you, so why don't you come join us? So I feel very fortunate and blessed to have found something that I love so much in the community. Again, in those times when the pandemic was at its height, just to have the connection of being on a new team and working then with my coach, and like him becoming our DS of the team, and like me constantly on the phone, whether it was laughing or crying with Nicola about all the like things that would, go right or go wrong. And it's just been, I can't imagine my life without Zwift, because it just has been such a huge part of it and impactful on so many different levels.
Kristen has competed in every UCI Cycling Esports World Championships on Zwift, finishing in the top 10 on 2 occasions. But beyond the racing, the sense of community that Kristen mentioned is no surprise when you look over some of the stats. So over the last decade, more than 4 million community rides have been organised. There are 37,000 clubs, almost 10 billion kilometres have been ridden or run on the platform, and there are now hundreds of kilometres of virtual roads to ride on. Zwift has brought cyclists together, even though they're not in the same place. This year, the Zwift Games broke records for participation in cycling esports, But it's also an incredible tool. You can design workouts or entire training programs, and you can test your progress to make sure that all your hard work is working. More recently, Zwift has focused some of its attention on hardware, launching the Zwift Ride and Zwift Cog and Click, as well as the Wahoo Kicker Core Zwift 1 with auto calibration and virtual shifting, both in an effort to remove some of the barriers to getting started on the platform and to help bring indoor cycling to the masses. The hassle of setting up a bike and the cost of smart trainers are two of the things that Zwift had highlighted as hurdles to some people, and that's something they're going to continue to work on in the near and long-term future. A lot of water has passed under the bridge since the launch of Zwift, and it's very easy to take it for granted and to forget just how much of a game changer it was and is. I mean, so many of us now take it for granted that we can jump on our bikes at any time of day and ride or race with people around the globe, or do the training session of our choice, or just ride for fun. In my case, fun is no longer fast, but at least at this point, it is fun. It broke down barriers, it created a large, hugely engaged online community, it opened up a doorway to the professional peloton, dished out rainbow jerseys to official UCI World Champions, and was pivotal in the launch of the biggest race in the women's professional cycling calendar. It's been quite the decade, really, and I bet there is a lot more still to come.